Hi, this is BlackJupiter, and quick! Name what you believe to be the most influential video game of all time. And I'm not talking to you personally, because if you're watching this channel, I already know the answer. But I'm talking games that forever had a ripple effect across a major portion of the medium. What do you think of? Go! Chances are you said something like Pong, the original Mario, Doom 1993, Super Metroid, Resident Evil 4, Minecraft, Dark Souls, Last of Us, Breath of the Wild, Fortnite. But I would argue it's this little PS1 occult classic that came out in 1998 by the name of Xenogears. Who? It shouldn't be surprising that the best of the best in the creative field are fans of the mediums themselves. It's why authors recommend you read other people's works when writing yourself, why directors watch movies they didn't film, and why game devs love playing games that they didn't make. Sometimes it's obvious where a game takes inspiration from. I mean, just look at the amount of Earthbound and Resident Evil 4 clones in the world. But what if I told you this game right here caused a shift in the gaming industry? One that allowed games to dive it deeper into darker subject matter, all with a philosophical, psychological, and spiritual lens. And a shift that led to a company that isn't Nintendo, known for being way too protective of their IP, to spearhead The Legend of Zelda. Allegedly. You know, one of the biggest gaming franchises in the history of the medium. Hi, my name is jELeeoo. I like rambling on and on about both video games and books, and I just made a video talking about Xenoblade 3 that's really lengthy and in-depth. Link in the description below. And making that video got me thinking about the strange, complicated, inspirational, and downright underrated story of the company behind the game, Monolithsoft, or as I like to call them, your favorite developer's favorite developer.
Aren't you just doing this to promote your own video?
Dude, do you always have to break the illusion that quickly?
Sorry?
No, you always do this. I spent over a year working on that video. I at least want a little return of investment.
Alright, geez, man, sorry.
Except you're not. I'm so sick of it, honestly. I figure instead of boringly reading out the company's positives point by point, it's better to tell y'all the story behind the company itself and where their innovative design ideas in business originated from. I'll make sure to show this graphic in the corner when something important to take note of shows up. So, back to the beginning, back to square one. It's the mid-90s, and RPG powerhouse SquareSoft is conceptualizing plot scenarios for their newest game that will spearhead the 5th generation of consoles, the PlayStation. This game will be known as Final Fantasy VII. And although eager to try out this crazy new 3D technology, the creative team behind the project are really wrapping their heads around what magnificent plot will complement such magnificent presentation. They were really stumped going through proposed scenarios like Karia goes through Ramen. I'm making a reference to the thing you like, so keep watching. Don't check the pinned comment. Anyway, one of these proposed scenarios came from a graphic designer slash director who worked on the SNES Final Fantasies and Chrono Trigger, a man by the name of Tetsuya Takahashi. This proposed plot was essentially his dream game, and by far his most ambitious, even compared to what he's made since. Yeah, Square told him no. Even for a series like Final Fantasy, at the time Takahashi was told that his plot was too dark, too complicated, and too ambitious. He was forced to go sit in his corner while the rest of his team made Final Fantasy VII. But then, descending from the roof of the house he built, Mr. Final Fantasy himself, Hironobu Sakaguchi, offered Takahashi the opportunity to make his dream game. Yeah, but his budget was however much his leftovers for lunch would sell for, and he has until this egg timer is up to make it. Corners were cut! This side quest, gone. This area, done before dawn. This dungeon, take it to the pond. Chop. Takahashi was allowed to make the game, but he had to work with a super young development team new to the process of game making, working on completely new tech as they made a generational leap from 2D to 3D. And again, they pretty much had no time to make the game. A good chunk of the development time was just learning how to develop. So Takahashi made a tough decision in order to keep this ambitious plot intact. Story over gameplay. The entire second disc of this game is pretty much just a visual novel rather than, you know, a JRPG. However, this man's ambition and new talent open to anything allowed this early 3D masterpiece to come out in 1998 under the name of Xenogears. And now I need to restrain myself from spending hours talking about Xenogears. Now, frankly, there's a lot to say here, and a lot I can't say here, seeing as I don't want to spoil this game, but also, Xenogears is a lot. You can tell it's a lot from the presentation alone. The aforementioned Final Fantasy VII used pre-rendered 2D backgrounds with 3D character models to really wow people with the power of the PlayStation, as did pretty much every other JRPG on the system and even some other chunky games on the PS1. However, in an ironic twist, the game aged way more poorly than Xenogears because this game decided to go much more stylized by fully using 3D environments and 2D character sprites for their look. Funnily enough, this early experience with 3D environments ended up becoming quite useful later on. It also helped that it went against the norm of big 3D CGI cutscenes and instead opted for simple 2D animated cutscenes for the big moments, saving heavily on budget and time. And it doesn't stop there, as this game somehow ended up being a better innovation on the ATB system that Final Fantasy IV used to revolutionize turn-based combat more than Final Fantasy VII itself did. Sure, the materia system is cool and all and allows for an exciting amount of customization, but Xenogears instead has A much cooler UI. I mean, look at this, come on. And B, the point combo system. Normal attacks are boring, so instead you have points for each attack, with the face buttons being a light, normal, and heavy attack, each taking more points to use. Combo them together for some fun times. And of course there's the main draw of this game, that juicy story. At the time, the plot of this game blew a lot of players' minds for having, as stated before, dark and complex themes such as complex ideas from late modern philosophy and psychology, mainly Jung, as well as more niche and obscure aspects from Jewish and Gnostic mythologies. The only other games to do that around the time were like Silent Hill 1 with the big bad cult of that game having heavy ties to Gnosticism, and like the SMT series a little bit. And not to downplay SMT, as I know the folks at this channel like those games, but at the time these games were not only unpopular, but they didn't really get that deep into the whole Jungian psychology aspect until Persona 3 and Nocturne came out, after Xenogears. And going back to Silent Hill 1, I don't exactly think it's a coincidence that the second entry of the series was the only one to pivot and go super deep into the psychological aspect of the town more, emphasizing constructs of the mind over the whole freaky cult business the other games deal with. Now, again, I'm not giving much detail into the game's plot, not only to avoid spoilers, but also just because it really is a lot to digest. But that being said, I will give a little synopsis of the first few hours of the game to attract a potential audience. In the game, you play as an orphaned amnesiac named Faye who enjoyed a simple life in his little village until it was caught in the crossfire of a geopolitical conflict. By the way, there's like 5 major nations in this game and they all don't like each other, but this army's different because they just showed up one day with no explanation. In an attempt to protect his village, Faye hops into a giant mech that the army somehow lost called a gear. With this mech, Faye goes crazy hearing voices in his head and accidentally massacres his village. That's what you get for using ancient tech that's meant to, quote, preserve the world, unquote. Faye and Satan, the village doctor and only survivor, flee the site with the gear in an attempt to figure out what's really going on with Faye, as well as the mysterious army who showed up to just raise a village like that. Along their way, they keep meeting new people and get more and more involved with the massive international military conflicts, as well as meeting mysterious figures aimed at them specifically, like an unknown pilot of a red gear and a man in a mask claiming to have brought the young orphan Faye to his peaceful village. What unfolds next is a plot of many twists and turns, but ultimately good twists and turns to service an amazing story written by Takahashi and his wife Soraya Saga. If this sounds awesome to you, then just go and play the game already. And Xenosaga. And Xenoblade. All of them! Furthermore, this game not only had an ambitious story, but ambitious lore too, seeing as Takahashi planned for Xenogears to be part 5 of a 6-game saga. We only know this because of a fan translation of a Japanese-only book stating that Takahashi is a man with a plan. Can you imagine what could have happened if the most influential game franchise, trademark, was real? And seeing as the game did pretty decent commercially and exceptional critically, a sequel for the game was obviously greenlit. So what happened? Well, bankruptcy happened. Now, whether you know or don't, Square has quite the history with making projects they think will do incredibly well, pumping way too much money and effort into it, ultimately for it to flop, perspective-wise. And a prime example of this is none other than... No, not you! And a prime example of this is none other than Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within, a movie that was overall... whatever. A real concord of movies, if you would. The failure of this movie, as well as some other risky investments, put the company in red ink for the first time, causing an internal panic for Final Fantasy X and Kingdom Hearts to fix, as well as a merger with the company Enix. So what does this have to do with Xenogears, I hear you ask? Soul? Well, Square thought it would be a great idea to snub the sequel for Xenogears so the devs can work on their box office failure of a movie. That early work on 3D systems really came in handy, huh? This, along with being told what he could and couldn't do too many times, left Takahashi extremely frustrated, and he got to ranting to a personal work friend of his named Hirohide Sugiura, a man operating on the business side of the company like Carson does to this channel.
Did someone say my name?
No, it's okay, honey, go back to bed. And so, this venting of frustrations led to Takahashi and Sugiura making a risky, but necessary decision. Pack their bags, take most of the Xenogears dev team, and go make their own company with blackjack and hookers. They would name this company Monolith Soft, which is honestly pretty baller. Oh, your company is named SquareSoft? Well, screw you. We're no puny square. We're an entire monolith. I love petty stuff like that. So, with the company now formed, they needed a publisher who was willing to take risks with them. They made the company with the idea of having way more creative freedom than they did at Square, after all. Initially, they were rejected left and right before finally landing a partnership with the big N themselves, Namco. As a subsidiary of Namco with the creative control they desired, the company immediately got to work with Takahashi as the creative lead, Soraya Saga working on art direction, and Sugiura handling the business side of things. They started helping Namco here and there with things that honestly were so minimal it's not even worth bringing up, but then they immediately got back on that horse with another RPG with complicated subject matters, a focus on spiritualistic philosophy, and an interesting combo turn-based combat system. This game released in 2002 to be known as Xenosaga Episode 1. An obvious homage and spiritual successor to Xenogears. And Takahashi even cemented the desired saga plan that Xenogears started by baking Episode 1 into the name. Now, honestly, pretty much everybody agrees that although this game is good, Xenogears is just better, and frankly, it's even less popular than Xenogears, so I won't be talking about these games that much. Just know that it goes more into world building and scale, though if you ask me, the first game in particular has way too many metallic hallways you traverse, and honestly, it's not that much better in the second game. And political intrigue. It even leans way more into the religious themes as well, seeing as humanity renamed the calendar to TC in this game, which stands for Transcend Christ. It just so happens that Xenogears does those things but better, which sucks because I actually like the setting and initial premise of this game way more. Humanity casually finds the key to God and begins space traveling and colonizing, but some unknown event caused humanity to just lose the location of Earth, now named Lost Jerusalem. I think that premise is so cool, but it just lacks the interpersonal drama that made Xenogears so gripping, which fits considering you play as an android in Xenosaga. Still, though not as good as Xenogears, it still cements the man's writing talents, showing the dev team wasn't just a one-trick pony, earning some more juicy reputation points and a solid place among Namco's arsenal. And while the game was in development, another young talent at the company named Masato Kato wrote a scenario for another RPG. After getting the green light, he and design director Yasuyuki Hone known for having exemplary work writing dialogue for both Xenogears and Chrono Cross, got to work on an RPG for the GameCube, because Namco's producers thought the console was feeling lonely. Aww. Funnily enough though, Tricrescendo, another subsidiary of Namco known for making the Star Ocean series, had a similar itch for a JRPG on the GameCube. So Mommy Namco decided the kids needed to be nice and play together, leading to the co-development of the 2003 GameCube RPG Baten Kaitos, which, despite having one of the English voice casts of all time,
who or what are you? Malpertio is the name of a cursed evil god from ancient times.
How was I supposed to know? And why do you know all this?
was rather impressive with its reception. In fact, it was so impressive that Satoru Iwata of Nintendo, yes, that Satoru Iwata, offered Honi to make a new entry in the Mother series. Yes, that Mother series. But ultimately, this plan fell through as the series creator said no. Meanwhile, Takahashi and Sugiura took a step back and reassessed the structure of their company, ultimately deciding to step back from the nitty-gritty of game development and instead taking a more broad position of creative control. To fill the vacuum he left, Takahashi decided he wanted younger talent to take these roles to promote a mentality of being okay with passing the torch and encouraging growth. Now, frankly, I could go on longer, but I'd be repeating myself at this point, so TLDR, they released a second Baten Kaitos, helped Namco some more, and got halfway through the 6-game saga with 3 Xenosaga games, having a satisfying conclusion, for the most part. Also, side note, they ended up taking a side quest to make amends with Square and helped develop Dirge of Cerberus, a Final Fantasy VII spin-off that's a third-person shooter starring Vincent Valentine, one of the optional party members of the original game. Lastly, they released a DSD make of Xenosaga 1 and 2, which is surprisingly well made. Too bad it's Japanese only unless you play with a fan patch. There were also plans for a third Baten Kaitos for the handheld system before Namco canceled it for unknown reasons. Speaking of, after a change in leads at Namco, Monolithsoft once again found themselves being constrained and frustrated. This only worsened after more red tape emerged, stemming from the new merger with Bandai to become Bandai Namco, most notable for flashbanging you before you boot up Elden Ring. Thankfully, ever since that discussion of a new Mother game being developed by the company, Nintendo saw Monolithsoft in a good light, and decided, why not? We'll buy your company and you get 100% creative control. Come and work for Nintendo. Alright, honestly, their start with the company was a little boring. They released 3 games that not even Xeno nerds care about. One was basically a contractual obligation left over from Namco, and the other 2 were just testing what they could do gameplay-wise. At least the last one had really cool graphics for a 2008 Wii game and was mildly comedic.
Holy shit! Look at that!
Firestorms.
Anyway, moving on. After Xenosaga kind of bombed commercially, the company was feeling a little down in the dumps, so they decided to focus on support for the time being. The first notable thing they did under Nintendo was significant help with the development of Super Smash Bros. Brawl, so that's cool. Then Nintendo decided to make... Imagine just having the idea for the greatest game ever flash into your head. Imagine being on a train and just... boom. Greatest idea in the history of ideas right there. What's the point of even trying anymore? Anyway, yeah, on the train, Takahashi randomly had the idea for a game world taking place on the corpses of 2 great titans. He immediately ran to the office to spread word, and Honi immediately got people working on a 3D model, making clever decisions like one of them having a bent knee to act as a sort of plane. Bada boom, bada bing, they have a game in the works, and they show it off under the title Monado, Beginning of the World. Something about that doesn't seem right. Hey, Iwata, does this seem right to you? No? Okay. So yeah, Iwata forced Takahashi into giving the game a name befitting of its legacy. That being Chuck's Wacky Adventure. Nah, could you imagine? Xenoblade released in 2010 and later in Europe and America the following years. To a lot of people's surprise, the game did extremely well for an RPG on the Wii. Of the Operation Rainfall games, long story, don't have time to explain, this was the only one to really be recognized. Though it started out niche, it slowly rose in popularity with Chugga Conroy, YouTube GOAT at the time, calling it his favorite game and starting a Let's Play on it. And then...
I'm really feeling it!
There's nothing quite like a Smash announcement to get an equal amount of people interested and disgusted simultaneously, huh? And from there, the rest is honestly history. Though Xenogears is still their most complex and ambitious game plot-wise, Xenoblade was at the right place at the right time, being downright insane for what it does on a technical level, even by today's standards. And although it's no Xenogears, the plot of this game is incredibly well written, starting off as a simple revenge story and slowly unfolding into an extremely rich narrative full of things like spiritual identity crisis and the idea of not being a slave to the past or future, but instead to just living in the present moment. The combat was also unique. It tried something, and there are signs of promise, but it's a little bare bones. But overall, this game was fantastic. Some dumb kid went and played it and made some videos on it. Go check those out. And even the folks at Nintendo agree with me, seeing as after this game's release, there was a high demand for Monolith services. Nintendo started coming to them for everything. Animal Crossing New Leaf and New Horizons, Pikmin 3, the Splatoon trilogy, Mario Kart World, and every single new Zelda game since Skyward Sword onwards. Except for Triforce Heroes. Also, though I can't find sources, there are also claims that there was small support for the Zelda remakes and remasters, as well as Mario Kart 8 and Pikmin 4. So if that's true, that's even more awesome. Honestly, if it was a major release for the company after 2010 that wasn't Metroid or a remaster, chances are Monolith helped. The company went as far as to move their office closer to Nintendo's, and the number of meetings increased greatly after, causing a cycle of detailed feedback and suggestions. Monolith then went as far as to compare their relationship with Nintendo to that of family now, with how closely they've been working together and how similar their goals are. And this rolling snowball only got bigger as when the trend was still very new, they gave a crack at an open world game and casually just made the best open world game ever with Xenoblade X. I mean, just look at this. Every single little corner of this massive world is just pure eye candy. In fact, this was so impressive that while working on an actual sequel for Xenoblade on Nintendo's upcoming new console, Nintendo said, "These employees? Mine now." And poached half their staff to work on this small little indie game you might have heard of called Breath of the Wild. Yeah, this version of Hyrule? Thank Monolith Soft for that. And Xenoblade 2's development struggling because most of the staff had to work on Breath of the Wild, causing a lot of wishy-washy outsourcing? Thank Breath of the Wild for that. Anyway, after Breath of the Wild, during the Switch era of Nintendo, they went hard on corporate expansion, hiring more people, making separate teams for in-house games and supporting Nintendo, as well as just releasing more Xenoblade games. Want to hear my thoughts on Definitive Edition and 3? Go watch my videos. And then Monolith Soft made their own in-house engine, which makes me so excited for whatever their new project will be. And thus, the world was happily ever after. So what exactly does that all mean? I hope that fun little history lesson taught you a thing or two, considering Monolith Soft had quite the unique little story. But if you didn't quite pick up on it, here's me laying it all out for you. Monolith Soft is essentially a story of perseverance and an uncompromising passion for creativity. And through its unique circumstances, the company learned various valuable lessons that led it to being the sleeper powerhouse that it is. The big one being the company's skills with world design and their technical optimization, all stemming from a bold decision during Xenogears' development. However, the more bold decision of not compromising for the game's narrative also showed that the team has ambitions and visions that they do their damnedest for. And it is through this ambition that we can also see another boon of the company, an almost unrivaled respect for the creator. I know it's cliche to say at this point, but truly games are way more affected by corporate meddling than you think, and as far as I can tell, with one big, pair of melons-shaped exception, nothing has gotten in the way of Monolith's creative vision since Nintendo acquired them. And the next big boon, and what I consider to be the most important aspect of the company, their willingness to let young talent thrive. Not to get political, but in a day and age where it seems like only old people can survive and there's a job crisis among the younger generation because companies want people with experience more and more, which leaves people with no experience who need experience with, well, nothing, it is so refreshing to see Monolithsoft realize we all need to start from somewhere and allow that somewhere to be their company. Yeah, they have Takahashi still spearheading their in-house projects, but it doesn't change that they actively go against this lame trend by hiring more and more younger game developers and let them get the experience they need, with Takahashi, Oni, and Saga taking more parental roles for those new hires. Besides, the new people are mostly on the B team now. This is all because Takahashi got stuck with an inexperienced team for Xenogears and recognized that though it was troubling, it was needed for the growth of both the team and the industry as a whole. Takahashi even decided to reflect this all by making it one of the main themes of Xenoblade 3. Gee, if only there were a video to go more in-depth on that take. Monolithsoft refuses to take L's. They take every opportunity they can to learn a lesson and help better improve their workers as a team and as individuals. All for the sake of a nice, healthy growth, they bloom as brightly as a lotus flower. And now look at them. They have their own engine, separate teams, one to spearhead whatever the heck Takahashi is cooking, and the other to carry Nintendo. Oh yeah, that reminds me, they've also harbored and trained their skills so hard that they're the doom of the gaming industry. No, really. You like indie rap?
Mic check.
Alright, so MF Doom, often called your favorite rapper's favorite rapper. If you don't consider him the best, at least acknowledge what an influence he is to the genre of rap. His lyricism and samples were insane, I love his music, here's my top 5 albums by him. Anyway, in the same way that MF Doom is your favorite rapper's favorite rapper, I hold the take that Monolithsoft is your favorite developer's favorite developer. Now, I already explained why that's the case for Nintendo, just look at the list. And also, recently, whispers and murmurs suggest they'll be leading the next major Zelda game, which is interesting and bold, and surprisingly not surprising. But what about the rest of the game industry? Okay, well maybe I should rename them to your favorite Eastern developer's favorite developer, but that's lame, so yeah. I mostly mean to the Eastern game world rather than the Western, but shut up. I don't know, maybe Xenogears inspired Planescape Torment, which by proxy inspired Disco Elysium? But either way, after the release of Xenogears, there was most certainly an increase in games at the time getting more brave with their narratives, and it seems they were more willing to get dark and philosophically/psychologically complex. Sure, games before Xenogears could get dark at times, but for the most part they were, by today's standards, well, standard. Generic. Something an AI would write a plot after. Okay, that's too harsh. But still, if you took an RPG at the time, it would likely have clear adventure structures with good and evil sides and only lightly tapping into an idea of some sort of metaphysical parallel. But then after Xenogears, we got games like the Drakengard and Nier games, Silent Hill 2, SMT Nocturne in Persona 3, 13 Sentinels, Suikoden 3, The Legend of Heroes, Trails to Azure, Tales of the Abyss. Those last two were suggested by a friend, I haven't played those games. Final Fantasy also got a little more jiggy with it. 7 was willing to get more complex and dark. Maybe Takahashi's energy when pitching Xenogears inspired Sakaguchi when he finally knew what he wanted the scenario of FF7 to be. And the trend also rings true for a good chunk of post-Sakaguchi Final Fantasy games. Mainly 12, 13, and the Shadowbringer and Endwalker expansions of 14. And then all of these games would go on to inspire games like Soma and the Bioshock trilogy, but mostly Infinite, as well as Signalis, AI The Somnium Files, oh, and also the Souls games, which inspired way more things, so on and so forth. Now, I'm not saying definitively that Xenogears was the foundation for this trend, but it certainly was one of the earliest pillars to hold it all up, if you catch my drift. And frankly, to me, this game, as well as these ones, are so good at times that other games are ruined for me. It has rewired my brain chemistry that much. Almost like a certain supervillain who came to take over rap. And thus, this game, and this company, in more ways than one, are the doom of the gaming industry, at least in the East. Nope, it still doesn't roll off the tongue. But yeah, that's Monolith Soft in a nutshell. I hope this video properly educated you in what to look for in a good game company, as well as convincing you to check out a super cool video doing a deep dive into their secret best work. What? Yeah, that's right, go check out my awesome video. Please, please, please. Anyway, that's it. I'm finally done with these videos. An entire year's worth of work, finally over. I can finally escape my editing prison. Yeah, freedom! Ah, shoot, before I do that, I of course need to thank the patrons who make videos like this possible. Their names are Bacon Insert Noun, Kaiser, Willpower784, Wonderland Snack, The Missing Samurai, Venforia, and Blake Jekyll. Okay, bye for real now, FNAF jump scare!